In this video, I'll be comparing the 3 different color profiles on the DJI Air 2S to help you decide which one you should be using while flying at night. I've been out flying a lot recently after dark, and I can't wait to finally figure out which color profile will let me get the most out of my Air 2S footage. Let's just get to it. The DJI Air 2S has 3 color profiles you can choose between in video mode. The first is the 8-bit normal color profile. It'll give you a decent image straight out of camera that doesn't require any color grading. The downside to this is it'll add an unnecessary amount of contrast to the footage, crushing some of the shadows. Next up is the 10-bit HLG profile. I haven't used this one that much, and from what I know, it's best used during the day as it's kind of like a HDR, high dynamic range type of profile. Might be interesting to see how this one looks in low light. D-Log is the last color profile. This profile allows you to shoot in 10-bit color as well, and is the best option for getting the highest quality footage during the day. Will this hold true for night? I'm not sure, but I'm about to find out. Here we have the Air 2S in the normal color profile. All the clips in this video were shot in H.265, 4K resolution at 24 frames per second. You can see the shot on the left is with the 1/50th of a second shutter speed, and the clip on the right is 1/25th of a second shutter. In the next clip, you can see that ISO 3200 looks great on the left side with the 1/50th of a second shutter speed. Both of these shots look clean in the noise department. Looking at the shadows at 100%, I'm not seeing nearly as much noise as I would have expected in the darks at such a high ISO. I did notice the 1/25th a second shot is already starting to blow out in the highlights, where the 1/50th second clip is exposed better. At the max ISO of 6400, the lights are all blowing out at both shutter speeds and have a considerable amount of noise in the shot. To help keep this video on the shorter side, let's just throw out all the clips that were shot at ISO 6400, since it's too noisy in the normal color profile, and you can't even shoot that high of an ISO in the HLG or D-Log profile. Switching to the HLG color profile, the max ISO you can shoot is 1600 when in the HLG or D-Log 10-bit profiles. Both shutter speeds look to have quite a bit more noise in the HLG mode than the normal one. The 1/50th a second shot on the left is darker than the 1/25th second shot on the right. It looks properly exposed in the highlights, but strangely enough appears to be a bit noisier than the shot on the right. The difference between the normal profile and the HLG is really noticeable when you put them side by side. The normal profile has more contrast, less detail in the dark shadows, and hides the noise a bit better. With 100% crop, you can really see how much better the HLG profile looks than the normal one. If you look at the car at the top drive-through window, you'll notice that the HLG profile gives you a much flatter picture that exposes the lights and shadows better. Finally, we have the D-Log color profile. 1/50th a second shutter looks really good and can even be brightened up a bit by increasing the exposure without adding too much noise to the shots. 1/25th a second shot isn't looking as good. The car is overexposed and you can't bring back any of the highlights in post with this one. I'm really liking the way the 1/50th a second shot looks at ISO 1600 in the D-Log profile, especially when comparing side by side with the HLG shot. Both are properly exposed and look better than the normal color profile in the straight down test. The HLG profile gives the footage a slate green tint, but that's easily fixed by changing the color temperature in post. I also did some tests in 5.6K resolution so that I could compare the settings and color profiles we just tested in 4K. Let's start off with the 5.6K footage in the normal profile. After seeing the HLG and D-Log clips in the 4K test, I'm not sure I'd even bother using the normal color profile anymore. The footage is just dark and has way too much contrast. ISO 1600 in the HLG color profile looks pretty amazing, especially compared to the normal profile stuff with the same settings. The HLG stuff is much brighter and has a way better dynamic range. Even the 1/25th shutter stuff looks really nice in the HLG mode. In my opinion, the D-Log clips look even better than the HLG. D-Log looks to be a little flatter and holds more detail in the shadows. I tried to compare the 4K footage against the 5.6K resolution stuff, and even with a 100% crop or 400% crop, I didn't see much of a difference between the two at night. Maybe it's just my screen, I don't know. I'll have some more examples of the different color profiles at night in a minute, but first I'd like to ask you to take a second and hit that subscribe button below, and if you could, click the thumbs up. By doing so, you help support my channel and can help it grow, allowing me to make more videos like this in the future. I ended up driving up the street for one last test. I chose a spot I could fly a little bit lower and get closer to some of the bright lights. Since I didn't see much of a difference between the 4K and 5.6K footage from the last test, I'll just go over some of the stuff I shot in 5.6K resolution for this one. In the normal profile, ISO 1600 is a little dark in the shot on the left at 1/50th of a second shutter. You'll notice that the overall brightness is better on the 1/25th of a second shutter on the right, but it does really start to lose detail and overexpose the highlights in the brighter lights. 3200 ISO in the normal profile is nice and bright, but also overexposes in the highlights and introduces a bit more noise than the 1600 ISO shots. I had my doubts at first, but after seeing this test, I think I'm definitely going to start using the D-Log color profile for most of my shots when filming at night with the Air 2S. The extra detail in the shadows and overall better dynamic range, plus the ability to get more out of the footage in post, really seals the deal for me. HLG profile looks better than the normal profile for sure, but appears to have more contrast and even more noise when comparing it to the D-Log stuff. I'll use the 5.6K over the 4K stuff if I need the extra resolution for a shoot or just want to pan or zoom in the edit. As for shutter speed and ISO, that really depends on the location and how brightly lit the spot is. I'll mostly be using ISO 800 or even max ISO 1600 in D-Log when filming at night from now on. I like the 1/50th of a second shutter stuff a little bit better, but we'll definitely use the 1/25th a second when shooting in darker locations or if I happen to be flying a little higher. I guess that's about it for this video. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or even an idea for something you'd like to see in a future video, go ahead and leave those below in the comments. Now get out there and fly.